Hey everyone, welcome back. Brand new Take Aim podcast, and excited to get this show out. I'm with Matt Tagget this week. We just got off the phone, and what an awesome episode. He's out in North Dakota, was out in North Dakota, I should say, and just killed a whopper mega giant of a deer, his best bow buck ever, 164 inches and change. But such a cool story just to listen to Matt tell us how he hunted North Dakota, being that it's so different than here in the Midwest. All our ag, all our cover, all our timber, versus how they do it out there, being wide open spaces, some sloughs, some cattails. But if you want to learn, listen to Matt. He has it dialed in. But a great show. Appreciate Matt being on, and hope you guys enjoy like always. And this episode was brought to you by HuntStand. Make sure to check out the best mapping and hunting app out available today. If you're looking to upgrade from the free version to the pro plan, make sure to use the discount code TakeAim10.
All right, guys, we are live, brand new Take Aim podcast, and excited to be back with Matt Tagget from REK Broadheads. And Matt, what's happening?
What is going on, man?
Not much, man. Excited to have you back. I know you were just on the show not too long ago, and basically, long story short, I was like, man, best of luck. And if you get one, we got to do this again. And dude, you shot a deer of a lifetime out in North Dakota.
Yeah, it seems like we had just talked, and like you said, you mentioned that if I got lucky, that would hop back on, and man, I'll be honest with you, I didn't feel like I had luck on my side, but here we are, so there's a story to be told.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. I was super pumped for you, and just being a fellow Michigander, I love it when guys like us get to go out of state. It's just neat to follow along, and North Dakota's a state I have yet to hunt, so I was super excited to kind of, follow along your story and kind of see some of the terrain and just, how you were hunting and some of the different stuff going on. But I'll let you kind of explain some of that. But, I just loved it, by the way. I just thought it was super cool. I was super pumped for you. But, just like I said, it's amazing just to kind of get out of here and do something different. And, North Dakota is way different. I mean, as you mentioned on the previous podcast, it's a lot of glass in it, a lot of doing it from the far, and not a lot of big timber.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a completely different style of hunting. Their season comes in really early. I think it opened on the 4th, I believe, this year, 4th of September. And, it kind of gets you in the tree a lot earlier and kind of work all the bugs out of your stuff before our season really comes in here in Michigan and stuff. But it's a completely different style of hunting. It's so open out there, at least where we go. I mean, you're pretty much just hunting little cattail sloughs and tree lines, really. I mean, there's no big blocks of timber anywhere. So it takes a little bit of getting used to and kind of adapting to your surroundings and figuring out how to get on these deer, because there's a lot of times, you'll get on a deer, you'll glass them for a few days, and there's just really no good way to set up on them, so you might be forced to just sitting in between corn rows or sitting down on the cattails or on a rock pile. You never know what to expect.
Yeah, that's one thing I kind of wanted to start the podcast with, was exactly how you guys started that hunt and what you did, Matt. Was it mostly glassing? Did you guys get there early to glass, or did you kind of just incorporate that as part of the hunt and just started to develop a plan?
So I think we got there, would have been 2 days before the season actually opened. And this was my 5th year out there. So I've had permission to do a really big farm out there now for 5 years that I've kind of been able to learn how the deer, work through it and what parts of the farm hunt better than others. And out there, a big challenge is the crop rotation. You might think one year you have the deer all figured out where they're really, bedding in this slough real heavy and they're feeding in this field. But, it might be because there's corn right there. For some reason, they really like standing corn. And, this year there was no corn at all on the farm I hunted. And it just really, every year you go out there, it's something new, and you got to adapt to something different, because the crop rotation just really changes how these deer are patterned and where they're at, where they're laying, and where they're feeding. And it kind of throws a curveball at you for sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. Had you already noticed that in the past and kind of developed a game plan for the crop rotation, or every year do you kind of go in and just still kind of see like, hey, are the deer going to potentially be in the beans, or, you go that route at all just to double check, or have you done it enough times already that you're like, the crop rotation's key?
Yeah, so the last 4 years I thought I had everything kind of figured out, and I don't think you ever fully have it figured out, but I kind of was getting to see a little bit of a pattern with the rotations there. A lot of times it's just back and forth between corn and soybeans, and this year actually they had a really wet spring and even a wet fall and snow very early on, so they were not able to harvest a lot of their crops last fall. So they were harvesting corn, I think, even into like May this year, which was kind of crazy. And so a lot of those fields did not get planted at all. So I would say, probably 40% of the land out there really in our area wasn't even planted. So it was literally just fields of dirt, which, was kind of, you can't really foresee that and plan ahead for that. I wasn't expecting it at all. And, I kind of was thinking that would force all of the deer into the fields that were planted, and maybe concentrate them a little heavier in certain areas. And it actually didn't really do that like I was thinking. I mean, we were glassing deer the 2 nights before season, and we were literally watching deer just out grazing around in open fields of dirt. I mean, I'm talking 300 acre fields of just solid dirt, like not even anything growing in it. And they're just walking around, and I don't know what they were doing, to be honest with you, but they were, it's like their patterns didn't really change off of the crops like I thought they would have, with it not being planted.
Wow, that's crazy. That was a question I was just going to ask, but you kind of answered it and said it was still dirt. I thought maybe, would it grow up like CRP looking, or, get some tall natural grass and weeds in it. But that's crazy that it was mostly dirt. I wonder what the heck they were doing.
Yeah, it was so weird. And some of the fields, were a little grown up to where you might think they might start bedding in it a little bit or something, but I think the majority of the farmers were trying to keep the stuff worked under or sprayed just to help them out, for next spring's planting and stuff. But I definitely was kind of ruling all the dirt fields out when we first got there. Like, okay, well, that's, there's going to be no deer there. And just for the heck of it, we threw a couple cameras and it's legal to bait in North Dakota, so we put up some corn piles and stuff. And sure enough, I mean, there was deer just pounding these corn piles in the middle of dirt. It was crazy.
That is crazy. Nonetheless, pretty cool, though. I mean, it's good to take advantage of it, obviously, if it's legal, in the state you hunt. And I don't know, Matt, there always seems to be something that is something special about just corn, man. It's such a drawing power. It's crazy.
It really is, too. And it's, I think it's because it's got that mix of cover and food right there. And then out there, they don't really... I guess timber would be the cattails, really. I mean, like our deer here tend to bed up in the timber, and out there they bed in the cattails. So, I mean, anytime you can find cattails and corn around it, it seems like you've got yourself a really good spot.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's good to know. That's, really good tip. I know you keep saying sloughs, so describe the sloughs, and does that incorporate the cattails, or is it two different things, or are the sloughs wet, and how do you go about, getting on something in one of those? So
the sloughs I'm referring to are basically just, if you were to get on Google Earth and look at North Dakota, it's literally just littered with little pothole ponds everywhere, and some of them hold water, some of them dry up at certain points of the summer, and but pretty much all of them have cattails all the way around them. It's kind of a marshy swamp area, and that's why North Dakota is so great for duck hunting. A lot of guys bounce around in these potholes and shoot ducks and stuff. But, so the cattails work as the bedding area around all these little ponds. I mean, they're everywhere. And, actually this year, a lot of the water was really high because they had so much snow last year and so much rain this spring that a lot of those sloughs, filled right up and flooded through the cattails to where the deer were not bedding in certain sloughs because, it was obviously underwater. But that kind of helped narrow down a little bit to where they were bedding. They weren't using all of them like they normally do in years past when it's been a little more dry. But that's pretty much what they are, is just little ponds. And, they got the cattails around the edge of them, and that's kind of what we focus on. That's what the deer seem to bed up in the most.
Gotcha. Yeah, a lot of the videos I've seen, that is exactly what you described with the sloughs. So that's really interesting. How did you guys go about from, at the start, it sounded like you guys were trying to put together, the plan and missing some of those crops. So you said that deer didn't really seem to change patterns much. So what did you really go to focus on? Were you look for those sloughs next to the corn still, or did that, lack of crop rotation affect some of those beddings in the cattail with the high water? It seems like there was a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, it seemed like there was definitely more deer bedded up in the tree rows than there has been in years past. I think, and that was probably just because of lack of cattail bedding that was out there this year with the high water and stuff. And aside from the cattails too, it's like, with there not being a lot of corn planted and not a lot of crops in general, we were trying to focus on, I guess, kind of like overgrown cattle pastures and stuff like that as well, near crops or near places that we've seen deer in the past feeding, and just really trying to pinpoint mostly where they're bedding, because that's half the battle out there, is because there's you can see so far and there's so little timber and so little places to set up really, that just finding where they're bedding is half the battle. And I've always said sometimes it seems like in North Dakota that 90% of the deer are living on 10% of the land, because it's just such a wide open landscape.
Yeah, that would make sense. I assume at first, like going back to your first year out there, Matt, it would probably seem almost like overwhelming trying to identify that bedding, so to speak, because of what you just talked about. I'm sure now you kind of got it down pat, but it probably at first is probably like mind blowing, because everything looks like bedding almost. Everything kind of looks the same in North Dakota. I mean, to a point.
It does, and I'll never forget our very first night in the stand. 5 years ago when it was. We showed up. We drove through the night, got there, and one of the locals kind of tipped us off to a spot that might be worth checking into. And we got there and literally hopped out of the truck like, what are we doing here? Like, somebody's playing a joke on us. Like, there is no deer here at all. There cannot be possibly white-tailed deer living here. We've never in our life had hunted anything like that. And so we just found a tree row, and we got on a few deer tracks and stuff, and just set up a stand. Like, well, we'll sit here tonight and kind of use it as an observation. And we sat there, and right at dark, sure enough, these deer just started popping up like out of the smallest little patches of cattails you could imagine, and they're just popping up all over the place. And it's like, wow, okay, well. And over the course of the next 5 years, we really just started pinpointing some of these spots that were more typical and seemed to get used a little heavier and stuff, and just really started picking away and learning everything we could. Yeah,
that's super cool. It's such a unique state, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, kind of just how different it is, and just gives you kind of that, confidence, just overall as a deer hunter or whitetail hunter, that, you can figure something out like that, just that seems so vast and so barren, but going back to kind of your buck, Matt, what started to kind of flip the script for you, so to speak, during the week? Did you at some point ID this buck or get a trail camera photo, or were you just kind of had narrowed down an area that was starting to produce a lot of deer for you?
So basically, I mean, long story short, I would have to say that a cell phone camera got this deer killed. I know we talked about the reveal cameras the last time we hopped on here, and I think they had just come out not too
right.
Long before that. But anyway, we picked up a couple of those reveal cameras, because some of these spots we're walking in, man, over a mile back in, and just to go in every morning and check cameras to figure out what the deer are doing, where you want to hunt and stuff, it gets to be a lot of work. So okay, we need to get cell phone cameras. That's going to take a lot of the legwork out of it for us. And so I found this spot. Actually, the landowner tipped me off to it. It was a piece that I believe he leased for farming. He didn't actually own this chunk, and he sent me over there. He said, I was in there a couple weeks back, and there's a ton of deer tracks in there. And what it was just like a series of probably 3 or 4 tree lines that were spaced, I don't know, maybe 250 yards apart or so. And there was a little slough bottom and kind of an overgrown cattle pasture. But in between the tree rows was standing corn that had never been harvested from last year. So it was kind of, broken down and kind of wind damaged, and I never really quite did figure out if the deer were actually laying in that corn or if they were, bedding in the further back tree lines, because I got in there and I set up on the first tree line. I didn't want to be too intrusive, and we set up a ground blind and a tree stand for both winds. And the tree stand, we were only able to get, I think, 8 foot up just because the trees out there are so screwed up. And we found a big scrape tree there. I mean, there was already, that was September 2nd, I think, and there was already 3 or 4 big scrapes underneath this big tree. It was like a big community scrape area, it looked like. And set a cell phone camera on it, and right away the first night, I think we had like 125-inch buck come in. And then day 2, I believe, or day 3 is when he showed up, the buck I killed. He showed up, and throughout, I mean, we were there for, I think, 14 days, and he was driving me nuts. He would just keep showing up on the trail camera over and over again all night long. He'd show up like 10 o'clock every night, and he'd blow my phone up, and he was literally hanging around until 6 in the morning, then he'd go back to bed. And I could never really figure out exactly where he was bedding. I never actually glassed that field because I didn't know the deer was in there until after the season had started. And he was just blowing me up all week. And at one point, you know, I had another stand on the other side of the farm, which was almost 3 miles away. And I had a couple nice deer over there. I was actually hunting. He was probably a mid-150s, 10-point, real heavy, real nice buck, and he was still in velvet. Yeah, I was hunting that deer, and I'm sitting in the stand, and the deer I ended up killing showed up in daylight over 3 miles away. I'm like, oh, man, are you kidding me? Like, you know, he had been in every night and not a single daylight picture until that night. I'm like, well, you know, what's the chances he does it 2 nights in a row? So I bailed off that spot. I was out there hunting with my cousin. I told my cousin, like, all right, you know what? I'm tearing this setup down because I don't want to play the game where I'm bouncing back and forth between spots because, you know, how that gets. You're always in the wrong stand, it seems like. And I told him, like, this is the deer I want, and, you know, I'm perfectly fine going home without a deer, but if I do it, like, that's the deer I want. So I went in there the next night, and sure enough, I mean, it was kind of a rainy, it was kind of a nasty night. I think it was like 50 degrees, and it was drizzling all night long. It was a little windy, and I actually had kind of a sketchy wind to go in there. And right away, I had 2 does come up through the old standing cornfield there, and they come walking up right. I mean, they pretty much pegged me, but they didn't really blow out of the set. They knew I was in there. I think they caught my wind, and they never really blew or anything, but they wouldn't commit to coming fully in because they knew I was in there. And it was probably, what was it? It was, I think, 7:20. He showed up. He come walking right in the set, and man, I bet you I didn't see the deer for 30 seconds, and I had an arrow in him. I knew right away, like, that's him. And I just, you know, all in pretty much one motion, I just grabbed my bow, come to full draw, and I didn't really take my time on the shot like I should have. You know, that's the biggest deer I've ever had in front of me in my life. And so I rushed the shot a little bit and hit him a touchback, which ended up actually being a liver shot. And he bounded off about 10, 20 yards or so. He stopped, and he just wagged his tail. And so I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, like, oh, no, that's not what you want to see, you know. And then he kind of started creeping off a little bit. He got about to 40 yards, and he stopped. And he was kind of hunching up a little bit. And I'm like, oh, man, you know, I got to put another arrow in this deer. So I started knocking another arrow. And then by then he had worked off behind that little scrape tree I was talking about. He got right behind that to where I could just barely see him. And then he kind of took a few more steps to where he was behind it. You know, I'm looking through branches with my binoculars trying to figure out what's going on, what he's doing. And at that point, a doe come in, and she, like, walked over towards him and got real spooky and, like, ran back towards me. And then I think that's when he laid down. And for the next hour, I watched this deer sit there laying down. I mean, he was only probably 45 yards from me, bedded up behind this tree, and he's got his head up and down, looking around. You know, he put his head down, like, you know, I'd sit there and watch him and think he had passed. And then he'd pick his head back up. And, I mean, for an hour, I'm just going stir crazy. Like, I don't know what to do, if I should get down and go over there and, you know, try to sneak in and put another arrow in him, or, you know, just sneak out and, you know, come back, you know, later or in the morning or what. And, yeah, I was going nuts because, you know, that's the biggest deer I've ever arrowed. And, you know, I'm calling a couple of my buddies. I had some cover wind where I could talk, and finally just decided, like, all right, you know, you need to just try to slip out of there before dark, real quiet, get back to the truck and head back to the house, and we just need to wait till morning. And that's what we did. We went back to the house, you know, talked it over a bunch. And at one point we actually thought about going in at like midnight because I was pretty confident that when I had left, he was expired. I thought his head was down and he wasn't moving at all. But I figured, if he's dead at midnight, he's going to be dead in the morning. So we waited till first light and went in there, and that's right where he bedded up and expired. He never, in total, he probably only ran a little over 30 yards,
Wow.
He didn't go far at all.
That's amazing. So I want to just backtrack a little, Matt. So from where you had the scrape and the trail camera, basically, how far away was your tree stand set up?
I think it was 17 yards.
Okay.
It was really close, and I was only 8 foot up, in the tree, like I said.
Right. So, and you had a 30-yard shot. So at 8 foot, you had a pretty broadside. So you got most of the deer. Both ways in and out. Which was great. So obviously, which we'll talk about in a second, like the broadhead did its job, for being a shot a little far back like that. But when that deer came in, so it came in from a direction that I take it you weren't expecting the deer to come from?
It was really weird in there. Like I said, I could never really figure out where he was bedding, just by watching him on the camera, because he would leave one direction one night or one morning to go back to bed, and then the next morning it'd be a different direction. I was almost starting to wonder if it was dependent on the wind. I kind of had deer really just coming in from all over the place. So, yeah, it kind of caught me off guard a little bit where he came from.
Yes, I figured as much. It seems like he probably was doing that, and where the direction he did come from, what did that tell you? Like, was he at the back end of that old cornfield, or was he like right in the same tree row as you, or where do you think he was?
I would have to assume that he was probably bedding in one of the other tree rows across that standing corn. That was kind of my guess. I never did confirm. I never actually walked back in there to see, what was in there or anything. But just from like the Onyx Maps aerial image there, like there was no sloughs really back in further or anything. So either he was laying in that cornfield or he was laying in one of the tree lines, which is probably more accurate.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you just said, you kind of identified everything after the fact. Maybe everything he needed was between row 1 and row 2 pretty much, huh?
Right.
Yeah, okay. That's pretty interesting, though. So, amazing that your instinct was, in the beginning, not to go in and intrude any further into that second row. So that was pretty good. On your
and I'll be honest with you, we I guess it's just my natural instinct. I always, going into a new piece, I want to learn everything about it. I want to see, all the terrain and everything, but when you're on a short trip like that, I guess, it's fairly long. We were there for 14 days, which is a good amount of time. But even then, you're scouting literally, 2 days before season, and you hate to intrude too far. And we were going to originally go to all those tree lines, and we started walking through that cornfield. And, it was just so dried up and loud. We're like, we can't do this. Like, we're going to bump every deer out of here, So we backed out, and we found that scrape line, and we set up. We're like, you know what, we're just going to wait it out, and hopefully they'll come to us, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, that's amazing. So one thing I kind of want to hit on real quick, Matt, is seems like in North Dakota, you know, stuff I've read or videos I've seen, like I never hear anybody talk about the moon or the weather. So can you hit on those two things, what kind of moon phase you were on, and what was the weather like? Because it just seems like the deer there will get up and move almost every evening. It seems like weather just doesn't matter. I could be wrong, but it just seems that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard saying. They're up every night feeding. Some nights they're up. I mean, like, you know, the one night I was sitting in at the spot where I actually killed that deer, and over 3 miles on the other stand location, I had deer up at 4 o'clock. You know, that's when the cold front hit, and you know, other nights they don't move till the last 10 minutes of light. It's just they're really sporadic, and I haven't exactly dug in far enough to like the moon phase and stuff like that to try to put together what the correlation there is on the movement and stuff. I know when you get a cold front, that's kind of the obvious. They're going to be up and moving, and luckily we had some very, very good weather. I mean, it was getting down into the 30s at night. When I shot that deer, I think it was right around 50 or so. I mean, we had some really good weather, good cold weather, and that just kind of had them up and moving quite often.
Yeah, that's a huge help. Now, do you remember, Matt, what the weather was like basically the week before you guys got there, or the few days before?
Yeah, so the week before we got there, it was quite warm. I mean, it was up in the 80s, and even the first night we scouted, I think, was right around 80. And it was pretty much perfect, with opening day. Those temperatures just dropped right off. It was like you couldn't have asked for a better scenario. And I know the moon, I believe, was full like the first day we were there, and so we would have been on a new moon there. And I don't know, that's one thing one of these days I'm just going to sit down and try to study the moon phases and stuff. That's just something I've never really gotten into. But that's where it was anyways for anybody that was wondering that, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, so let me say this. So overall that week, with the moon being full and then going into a new moon, did you feel like, Matt, you saw more deer in the morning or the evening hunts?
And that's the other thing too is out in North Dakota, because it's so open. I think I've hunted one morning.
Oh, okay.
One or two mornings in 5 years, just because it's so open and it's so hard to get into your stand locations. They can see you coming from 3 miles away. Gotcha. And it just seems like you do more damage than anything. Right.
Yeah, gotcha. So obviously all the deer movement was in the evening then, but usually, I mean, I don't know if it's correct or not, but I've always noticed leading up to the full moon, I feel like I have better morning hunts, and the few days after I have better evening hunts. So I don't know, again, that correlates to anything that, was your hunt out there that week, but obviously that weather snap, had to play a huge part in your guys' success out there.
And that's kind of the biggest thing I always look for is, I think temperature probably trumps mostly anything, for deer movement. I mean, I'm not an expert at this or anything or claiming to be, but it just seems, those cold fronts, when you're going from 80 degrees down to 50, that's going to get the deer moving. And that's always what we look for when we're out there, in the past 5 years. You can almost like predict what we get there, and we always say, like, temperature's going to drop on Tuesday. That's going to be a kill day. Like, we can predict it, and it's normally pretty true, and it's a lot of times it's just based off the temperature. At least that's what we look at.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you there, man. I think weather trumps all, so to speak. And like you've said actually a couple times, now you couldn't ask for a better scenario with your guys' weather. So that was, just so lucky for you guys. I mean, maybe the outcome would have been the same, but that weather change and pattern definitely helped your guys' hunt without a doubt.
Yeah, it was absolutely perfect. I couldn't have asked for better weather, and I had friends down in Kansas hunting just about the same time there, and they were, I mean, it was quite warm down that way, so we were pretty happy with the weather that we were given.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, just to explain everybody, Matt, that's listening on the podcast, I know what he looks like, you know what he looks like, but explain this deer and what he ended up being, because it's really awesome what you ended up killing out there.
So he has 14 scoreable points. I think he scored out at 164 and 3/8. That's just, my rough score here. I'm not, I haven't had him officially measured or anything. But he's got 5-inch bases. I think he's got like 22-inch beams. He's got a big split G2. He's got double split brows. I think 10.5 or 11-inch G2s. He's about 17.5 wide. I mean, just a really stellar-looking buck. He's got a lot of character. And, and I actually had thought at one point that it was the deer I had, I don't want to say passed up, but I was at full draw on a deer back in January out there. And it was he had double split brows and looked very similar to this buck. I was at full draw at like 40-some yards on him, and it just didn't feel right. It was really windy, and there was a lot of deer in the way, and I never took the shot. And I had seen him a few times throughout that week. I got some video of him, and the landowner actually found his shed antlers, and he brought him over when I killed this deer. And we were trying to compare it and see if it was the same buck, which it wasn't. They were very close, but we're pretty confident it's a different deer. But he's got a bunch of character. He's thick. I mean, it's literally everything I could ever imagine in killing a nice big trophy buck.
Yeah, man. I mean, he is awesome all the way. Kudos to you. And I assume, like later that night you probably had, or actually it would be the next morning, but I assume you probably had a couple bush lights to celebrate, some lattes.
Just a few, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to when you kill the biggest deer of your life. That doesn't happen often.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it's one of those deals where it really didn't even feel real, I guess. I'm just kind of sitting there trying to take it all in that day and just looking at it like, man, did I really just kill this thing? Like, I've been thinking about that day for so long, as a bow hunter. Like, I've killed some pretty nice bucks through the years. I've never killed one to this size. And to finally actually do it, you think about that day, like, when am I going to get a big one, And
yeah.
for it to finally all come together was just really cool. And, I couldn't be happier. I'm just happened to be the lucky guy that sent an arrow in the right direction that night, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of the arrow, man, I know obviously, you tipped it off with the REK Broadhead, but were you using the expandable or the fixed version?
I was using the expandable, and that was kind of gave me a little bit of peace of mind, I guess, when I hit that deer and I knew the shot was a little further back than it should have been. But, I mean, that thing's got, with the slap-on impact opening, I mean, you're looking at about a 2-inch cut. And, when he ran off, I didn't really see any blood squirting out or anything because, things happen quick and stuff. But there ended up being a really good blood trail. It was short. Like I said, he didn't run far, but there was plenty of blood. And just hitting him and watching the way he reacted and watching a bed up right there, I knew, with that big of a hole in him, like, he's going to expire as long as I don't bump him out of there. So that's when we kind of made the call to just back out and let him be. And he was going to definitely die. So,
yeah, ultimately, I mean, we've heard that saying so many times, when in doubt, back out. And ultimately, that was the right call. And, it's so hard when you're in that situation. Like, I feel for you because I've had situations like that where, you hit a deer and you actually see it go down, and all these things go through your mind. Like, do I get down? Do I try to, do a stalk on it, get another arrow? But ultimately, you did the right thing. Like, if he's already down, he's obviously hurt really bad. And, like you said, if he's dead, he's going to be dead in the morning. So,
Yeah, exactly. And it just sucks so bad because you're so excited and you want to get your hands on them. But, I mean, I've just, I've seen it myself. I've lost deer, rushing it. And I've seen a lot of people, friends and stuff, lose deer from just going in there too soon and bumping them out of their beds and stuff. And it's like, it's just not worth it. I mean, yeah, you take the risk of having the coyotes come in and destroying the meat and stuff. But, luckily in my case here, they never come in. I don't think I slept at all that night. I was up, every hour checking the cell phone camera right there, and because he was bedded up 20 yards from the cell camera, and I'm sitting there looking at it, like are the coyotes coming in, or and that whole night there was like no deer really coming in either, which was kind of weird. Kind of made me think that okay, maybe he is dead right there, and no deer want to come into the area because there had been deer in there every night, all night long for the past week.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, that's crazy. So, I mean, hopefully that was peace of mind for you a little bit, but I sure know it's hard to sleep like that. When you've shot something and you got to wait, it's killer, and
it is. But if you bow hunt long enough, that's it's bound to happen. So
yeah, it's part of the game. Yeah, you don't always get to see that 10, 30, 40-yard drop and it's over. So there's always a new situation abound. at some point in bow hunting career. But anyways, man, super glad you could join us, and glad as well that the REK Broadhead did its job on a liver hits are deadly. But like you said, thank God, I think it was just a bonus for you. You're using the expandable version, and the deer went down in sight, and you got out of there, and man, you got a deer of a lifetime to tell this story over and over now.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. It really couldn't have played out much better. We just I don't know, just extremely lucky, and still on cloud nine. I don't really know what else to say. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. Yeah, and you deserve to be on cloud nine. I hope you're on cloud nine all year, and I hope the rest of the season goes great for you, and hopefully you just shoot a great Michigan buck at least, and we do this again.
That would be great. I'm hoping. we'll keep at it.
Yeah, for sure. But Matt, let everybody know again where they can find REK at, and drop your Instagram on us.
Yeah, you can find REK Broadheads on Facebook and Instagram at REK, and that is REK_Broadheads, or www.rekbroadheads.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Matt. We'll do it again, and as you guys know, you can catch us every week. iTunes. Now we are actually on Amazon Music, which is phenomenal. So you guys are streaming off the Amazon Music app. You can find us there, Unfiltered Outdoors, and we'll see you guys again real soon.